Most people die because they're in a genetic program that if you were truly living completely in the present moment, all of your attention and energy were in the present moment, then you would be out of the program. It would make sense then that when your body is programmed into a predictable future based on what you've did in the past, then it's almost like a predetermined destiny. People lose their free will to a program, and all of a sudden now, the will is getting greater than the program. And they're literally changing a line of time. That's what we're doing. There's not a lot of evidence that shows that people can be immortal, and yet there's an immortal gene. Cancer cells have the immortal gene signaled a lot of times. So then your will to live has to be greater than your fear of dying. So then if there's an immortality gene, then on some level it has to be selected and instructed. Historic figures, charismatic leaders, spiritual beings that have overcome death. It would require then someone who has actually accomplished it to be able to teach it, because they would know the journey. Yes or no? And it would have to be ascending to greater and greater levels of energy. And theoretically, when all that energy is sitting right in that pituitary gland, and all that energy is in your brain, you know, of all the historic figures of the light around their head, I mean, that's when you're transcendent. Your divinity is greater than your humanity. So theoretically, there's a gene for immortality, but it's got to receive the right signal. Now, I don't think that signal is going to be chemical. The 98.5% of all those genes that can be selected and instructed, my theory is it's going to have to become acted by electromagnetism, a greater frequency than matter, because it makes sense then a coherent signature of energy is going to be greater to change matter than matter changing matter. Chemistry is. But the receptor sites on the outside of the cells happen to be 100 times more sensitive, in some references 200 times more sensitive to electromagnetism than to chemistry. So then if the signal is more energy and it's coherent energy, and the person is raising their frequency and they're above their reactions to their environment, they've mastered fear. They would be out on that course every day until they walked across it with no fear at all. Eyes open, eyes closed, that's just what they would do. But they would need a hierophant. They would need a teacher. They would need someone who crossed that same path to be able to instruct them. So then the soul kind of works intimately with our DNA, because at the end of your life, when you die and you leave your physical body, you're a conscious sovereign being, and the divine has to get to know how you did. So you as a consciousness, the soul goes, take a seat. Let me just show you the show that we've been watching the whole entire time. And the soul plays back the entire life. But the thing is that you're not only experiencing it as you're observing yourself, and you're experiencing the feelings of how you're affecting everybody else. And if you make the choice and you evolve, then of course the experience then begins to change your genetic expression. So then the soul then says, okay, here's the options, probable lines of time. There are probable lines of time that are the more probable than others. And there is a probable line of time for living in the same body and raising your frequency to the point where you can go wherever you want with your body. That's the ultimate, yes or no? And you can whip bread out of nothing, and you can be in two places at once, and you can be on an alternate universe and have a whole life there, and you can be dimensional. That's the freedom of when you've mastered yourself and you've mastered the conditions. But most of us are headed in a certain timeline based on our genes and based on our own personal evolution. And that's what makes this time right now so powerful. This time right now is the age of information. And in the age of information, ignorance is actually a choice. And people are beginning to realize that I don't need a doctor to find out what my disease is. I don't need to go to the library or talk to my teacher. I can just find the information. And people are starting to wake up to greater understandings, and that is starting to become the collective. And that collective energy in the field, the collective consciousness, the collective awareness is changing the future of humanity. Is that we have to collectively become one mind. And when we collectively become one mind, we no longer are seduced by those things. And we are now like a flock of birds all moving in the same direction, and those fish all of a sudden moving as a school. Nobody's leading, everybody's leading. We're just connected. And what do you think we're doing when you tune in to the power of love in this room? Don't you know everybody dialing into that same frequency is causing that frequency to be in this room? And if everybody's doing it, it's getting more collimated, more coherent, more organized. And if you put your attention on it, there's more of it. So then when you're leading with your heart, that's enough. That's enough. So then when you have a collective mind, and people are moving in that way, and they're no longer reacting to politics or whatever, and they no longer need those things, you're catching somebody who's starting to awaken. Yes or no? And if you're focusing on the divine, and that's where all of your attention is, you won't see ethnicity. You won't see skin color. You won't see anything as separation. You'll just be like, wow. So as we move closer and closer to that point, the probability of us changing our life, the length of our life, not from low stress foods and not from vitamins. All those things are good, matter to matter. And now the awakening of this, even if we changed little timelines just this week, we changed lines of time, you change something about yourself, you are going to walk into a different future that is your genetic timeline. And now you're bumped off course. You just got to be willing to stay in the unknown and be comfortable with it. If you know you're eternal, why not just go all in? You just get another body and you say, wow, whoa, I'm a little different than the last one. And you would be less prejudiced, I assure you. You have no idea with what you're doing right now, how it's changing the future of many, many people. So then we have to become our own genetic engineers. And if you could assign meaning to what you're doing and understand that every time you change your emotional state and you reach for the divine and you unfold and you fall on into nothing and you let go and trust in that intelligence, it moves closer to you.